Well, part of the concept that I thought and felt was extremely interesting, and you referred to it as the secret to fat loss, was this calorific slowing down of that process. And I thought this was well stated, that you talked about this bucket that has blood in it, and that feeds into the system, and you call that energy pathways. Describe for our listening audience what you meant about those energy pathways, or that entering into the system itself.
Absolutely, and this is the metaphor that I was referring to earlier. So we have a bucket of 5 liters or quarts of blood. That's our circulatory system. And you imagine dumping calories into this bucket, which is the calories that are digesting and coming into the bloodstream from the intestine.
Okay.
And this bucket has a hole in the bottom where calories are coming out into muscle tissue. A larger hole means more is going to muscle. Smaller hole means less is going to muscle.
Could we think of that as the dilation or the contraction of the insulin release?
Yes.
Okay.
But more properly and more technically accurate would be the effectiveness of insulin at the level of the muscle itself. So this is where things can get slightly confusing without some PowerPoints or some scratch paper in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
If you imagine this bucket with this hole in the bottom of calories going to muscle from the bloodstream, and if the bucket overflows over the top of it, it's going to fat.
Okay.
So now the calories coming in, if they come in faster, then they go out the bottom into muscle tissue.
Okay.
Then it overflows the bucket. So now where does insulin come into this scenario? Insulin changes the size of the hole in the bottom of the bucket to muscle. If you're insulin sensitive, then when calories come into the bucket, insulin is released into the bucket and opens up that hole so that those calories very quickly go into muscle tissue. The bucket never overflows into body fat. If, on the other hand, you're insulin resistant, then even though insulin is being released into the bucket, the size of that hole does not change and muscle absorbs very little fuel. In the extreme case, this is called type 2 diabetes, where muscle absorb is very unresponsive to insulin, so that even when large amounts of insulin are released, very little is going to muscle, blood sugar levels rise dramatically after a meal, and the vast majority of those calories go to body fat. What controls the impact of insulin on the size of that hole in the bottom of the bucket? What is it that determines how large that hole gets when insulin binds to the muscle fibers?
And this is part of that dysregulation that occurs when
Exactly.
a diabetic condition is happening.
And this is largely determined by the types of foods that we eat. Exercise impacts it, genetics impact it, but what a large percent of the population doesn't realize is that the types of foods they're choosing to eat, the types of fats, the types of carbohydrates, has a dramatic impact on the effect size of insulin on the muscle fiber.